Your brain doesn't know the difference between a broken bone and a broken heart. Both trigger identical neural alarm systems that flood your body with stress chemicals and pain signals. But what if I told you that the same neuroplasticity that heals physical injuries can be deliberately programmed to make you psychologically bulletproof? When researchers place individuals experiencing heartbreak or social rejection into functional MRI machines, the scans reveal something extraordinary. The anterior cingulate cortex and right ventral prefrontal cortex illuminate with the same intensity as someone experiencing physical trauma. This isn't metaphorical language, it's measurable neural activity that demonstrates emotional pain literally hurts in the most biological sense possible. The anterior cingulate cortex, positioned deep within your brain's limbic system, serves as a crucial interface between emotional processing and conscious awareness. When someone betrays your trust, dismisses your efforts, or attacks your character, this region processes the social threat with the same urgency it would respond to a physical wound. The electrical activity, neurotransmitter release, and blood flow patterns are virtually identical, whether you're experiencing a broken bone or a broken heart. What makes this discovery revolutionary is understanding that your brain doesn't distinguish between categories of pain, it simply registers threat and damage. The neurochemical cascade that follows emotional injury involves the same stress hormones, inflammatory responses, and neural pathway activation as physical trauma. Cortisol floods your system, norepinephrine spikes, and your sympathetic nervous system mobilizes resources exactly as it would for bodily harm. This neurobiological reality explains why emotional wounds can feel overwhelming, why social rejection triggers such intense physiological responses, and why psychological hurt can manifest as actual physical symptoms. Your racing heart, tight chest, and churning stomach aren't dramatic overreactions, they're appropriate biological responses to what your brain perceives as genuine injury. But here's the transformative insight: recognizing emotional pain as a neurobiological event rather than a personal failing completely reframes your relationship with psychological hurt. You're not weak for feeling devastated by someone's cruelty, you're experiencing a normal neural response to perceived threat. You're not oversensitive for being affected by rejection. You're demonstrating the proper functioning of evolutionary systems designed to keep you connected to your social group for survival. This understanding creates profound psychological distance from the experience itself. Instead of being consumed by the pain, you can observe it as a fascinating display of your brain's protective mechanisms. The shift from "I'm being destroyed" to my anterior cingulate cortex is responding to perceived social threat transforms you from victim to scientist, from sufferer to observer of your own remarkable neurobiology. The physiological sigh, a double inhale through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth, represents one of the most powerful real-time interventions for emotional regulation available to the human nervous system. This specific breathing pattern directly stimulates the parasympathetic branch of your autonomic nervous system, triggering what researchers call the relaxation response within seconds of implementation. When someone attempts to hurt you emotionally, your sympathetic nervous system floods your body with stress hormones designed for physical threat response. The physiological sigh acts as a biological circuit breaker, literally shifting your nervous system from fight or flight activation to rest and digest recovery. Cold exposure protocols create what scientists term cross-stressor adaptation, the phenomenon where managing one form of acute stress builds resilience across all stress categories. When you deliberately expose yourself to cold water at 50-59 degrees Fahrenheit for 2-4 minutes, your norepinephrine levels increase by 200-300%, creating a controlled neurochemical stress response. Your brain learns to maintain cognitive control while your body experiences acute discomfort, building neural pathways that transfer directly to emotional challenges. The individual who can remain calm and focused during cold exposure develops the same neural architecture needed to stay centered when facing psychological attacks. Stress inoculation training operates on the principle of hormesis, the biological concept that small doses of stress make organisms stronger. By voluntarily engaging with manageable challenges, you're literally rewiring your brain's threat assessment system. Each time you choose discomfort over comfort, you're strengthening the connections between your prefrontal cortex and limbic system, creating more efficient emotional regulation pathways. Your brain adapts to stress exposure by becoming more skilled at processing intense input without losing executive function. The most remarkable aspect of these protocols is their measurable impact on brain structure. Neuroimaging studies show that individuals who practice deliberate stress exposure develop increased gray matter density in regions associated with emotional regulation, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex and insula. These aren't temporary changes, they represent actual structural adaptations that make you biologically more resilient to emotional challenges. The person who consistently practices physiological protocols for managing acute stress becomes fundamentally different at the neural level, possessing brain architecture that processes emotional input through pathways of strength rather than every human behavior emerges from a complex neurochemical cocktail that exists entirely within the actor's brain, completely independent of your actual worth or character. When someone attempts to hurt you, they're operating from their unique combination of stress hormones, neurotransmitter imbalances, past traumatic experiences encoded in their amygdala, and unconscious behavioral patterns stored in their basal ganglia. Their cruelty is a direct manifestation of their internal neural chaos, not an accurate assessment of your value as a person. Consider the neurobiological reality of someone in a state of chronic stress or unresolved trauma. Their hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is dysregulated, flooding their system with cortisol and creating a persistent state of threat detection. Their amygdala, hyperactivated from past wounds, scans the environment for danger and frequently misinterprets neutral stimuli as threatening. Their prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decision-making and empathy, becomes compromised under chronic stress, leading to impulsive and often hurtful behavior. When this person lashes out at you, they're not responding to who you actually are. They're responding to their own internal threat signals. The concept of psychological projection reveals another layer of this phenomenon. Individuals unconsciously attribute their own feelings, thoughts, and characteristics to others because their brain's default mode network constantly processes information through the filter of their personal experience. Someone who calls you worthless is revealing their own deep-seated feelings of inadequacy. Someone who questions your integrity is projecting their own moral struggles. Their brain literally cannot perceive you accurately because all input gets processed through their existing neural patterns of self-perception and past experience. Neuroplasticity research demonstrates that adult brains remain remarkably influenced by childhood experiences, particularly those involving attachment trauma or emotional neglect. An individual whose early relationships were characterized by inconsistency, criticism, or abandonment develops neural pathways that anticipate rejection and respond defensively to perceived threats. Their hurtful behavior toward you is an automatic response programmed by decades of neural conditioning, not a conscious evaluation of your character. Understanding this neurobiological basis for human behavior creates profound psychological distance from their actions. You begin to see their cruelty as a symptom of their internal dysregulation rather than evidence of your shortcomings, transforming your emotional response from personal devastation to compassionate understanding of their neural programming. The human brain's reward system, centered in the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens, responds to meaning-making with the same neurochemical enthusiasm it reserves for food, sex, and other survival-critical activities. When you successfully extract purpose from painful experiences, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter that drives motivation and reinforces beneficial behaviors. This isn't philosophical consolation, It's measurable neurochemistry that literally rewards you for transforming suffering into wisdom. Post-traumatic growth research reveals that individuals who construct coherent narratives from their most difficult experiences show increased activity in the brain's meaning-making networks, particularly the medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex. These regions integrate emotional experiences with personal identity and future planning, creating what neuroscientists call narrative coherence. When someone hurts you and you can frame that experience as essential training for developing empathy, resilience, or boundaries, your brain treats this cognitive reframing as a significant victory, flooding your system with neurochemicals associated with accomplishment and progress. The anterior temporal lobe, responsible for semantic memory and conceptual understanding, becomes highly active during meaning-making processes. This region connects disparate experiences into unified themes, allowing you to see patterns across your life that transform individual painful events into chapters in a larger story of growth and development. The person who betrayed you becomes a catalyst for learning about trust and discernment. The rejection you experienced becomes training for emotional independence. Your brain's reward circuits activate not despite the pain, but because of your ability to metabolize it into valuable insight. Viktor Frankl's observations about concentration camp survival align perfectly with modern neuroimaging studies, showing that individuals who can construct meaning from extreme adversity demonstrate remarkable resilience through measurable changes in brain connectivity. The meaning-making process literally rewires neural pathways, strengthening connections between regions responsible for emotional regulation and cognitive control. Each time you successfully transform a painful experience into purposeful learning, you're building neural architecture that makes future challenges easier to process and integrate. The most profound neurobiological shift occurs when you realize that your capacity to extract meaning from any experience is unlimited. Every instance of emotional hurt becomes raw material for developing psychological sophistication, emotional intelligence, and human understanding. Your brain begins to anticipate growth opportunities in difficult experiences, priming your reward circuits to activate when challenges arise rather than when they're avoided, fundamentally changing your relationship with adversity from threat to opportunity. The medial prefrontal cortex, your brain's center for self-referential processing, maintains what neuroscientists call your self-schema, a complex network of beliefs, memories, and assessments about your identity and capabilities. This neural representation of self becomes either robust or fragile, based on the quality and consistency of evidence you feed it over time. Individuals with stable self-concept have built their identity on concrete data about their growth, achievements, and character demonstrated through repeated action, creating neural pathways that remain consistent regardless of external feedback or criticism. When your self-worth depends on external validation, your brain's reward and threat detection systems become hijacked by other people's opinions. Each piece of positive feedback triggers dopamine release in your nucleus accumbens, while criticism activates your anterior cingulate cortex as if you're experiencing physical pain. This creates an addictive cycle where your brain craves external approval to maintain baseline neurochemical balance, making you psychologically dependent on others for emotional stability. Your self-concept becomes as unstable as the moods and opinions of those around you. Evidence-based self-concept operates on entirely different neural principles. When you consistently track your progress, document your growth, and maintain detailed awareness of your developing capabilities, you're feeding your medial prefrontal cortex with concrete data rather than subjective opinions. Your brain builds neural representations based on measurable outcomes skills you've developed, challenges you've overcome, values you've consistently honored, and goals you've systematically achieved. This creates what researchers call self-efficacy, a neurologically grounded confidence in your ability to handle whatever challenges arise. The hippocampus, responsible for memory consolidation, plays a crucial role in building stable self-concept by encoding specific instances of your competence and character into long-term memory. Each time you act with integrity despite temptation, persist through difficulty when others quit, or demonstrate capability in challenging situations, these experiences become permanently integrated into your neural self-representation. Unlike external opinions that fluctuate based on others' emotional states, this evidence-based identity remains consistent because it's built on actual behavioral data. Neuroimaging studies show that individuals with stable self-concept demonstrate stronger connectivity between their prefrontal cortex and limbic regions, indicating better emotional regulation and less reactivity to social feedback. Their brains have learned to process criticism and praise as interesting information rather than threats or rewards to their fundamental identity. When someone attempts to hurt them with words, their stable self-concept acts as psychological armor, allowing them to evaluate the input objectively rather than defensively. The paradox of psychological strength reveals itself through the neurobiological reality that emotional invulnerability and genuine compassion emerge from identical neural architectures. When your sense of self is no longer fragile and requiring constant protection, your brain's resources can shift from defensive vigilance to empathetic understanding. The anterior insula, responsible for both self-awareness and empathy, functions optimally when it's not overwhelmed by personal threat detection, allowing you to perceive others' suffering with clarity rather than through the distorted lens of your own vulnerability. Individuals operating from psychological fragility experience what neuroscientists call empathic distress. Their mirror neuron systems become so activated by others' pain that they're forced to emotionally withdraw or respond defensively to protect their own unstable inner state. Their amygdala interprets others' emotional expression as potential threats, triggering fight or flight responses rather than compassionate engagement. When someone with a fragile ego encounters difficulty in others, their brain automatically asks, "How does this threaten me?" rather than "How can I help?" Emotional invulnerability creates the neurological conditions necessary for what researchers term empathic concern, the ability to perceive and respond to others' suffering without becoming destabilized by it. Your prefrontal cortex, no longer consumed with self-protection, can engage its full capacity for perspective taking and emotional regulation. The same neural pathways that allow you to remain centered when someone attacks you also enable you to stay present with others' pain without being overwhelmed by it. Your brain's threat detection systems, calibrated through building inner strength, can distinguish between actual dangers and others' emotional dysregulation. The vagus nerve, which connects your brain to your heart and digestive system, demonstrates measurably different activity patterns in psychologically resilient individuals. Higher vagal tone, associated with both emotional regulation and social connection, allows your nervous system to remain in a state conducive to genuine care and authentic relationship. When you're not defending a fragile sense of self, your natural capacity for connection and service can emerge fully. Your emotional invulnerability becomes a gift to others because they can sense they're interacting with someone who won't be destabilized by their struggles or triggered by their pain. The most psychologically strong individuals often become natural healers and guides precisely because their inner stability creates space for others to be authentically human. Their unshakable foundation allows them to witness others' darkness without fear, offer support without enabling, and maintain boundaries without cruelty, skills that emerge naturally when your own psychological house is built on solid neural ground. The protocols are clear, the science is proven, and the choice is yours. Tomorrow morning, implement the physiological sigh when you feel triggered. This week, expose yourself to controlled stress through cold showers or challenging workouts. Begin documenting evidence of your growth and capabilities instead of seeking validation from others. Your brain is waiting to be rewired. Your neural pathways are ready to be strengthened, and your transformation from victim to victor starts with the next conscious choice you make.